Hi guys, in the last video we talked about how guitar slapping and popping riffs are constructed and how to sequence the different mechanical elements to achieve the parts you're hearing, and then how to then flip that around and use that in a creative way. But you're probably going to want to know how to mechanically actually do that. So this video is going to address that a little bit. So first off, how do we slap? Well, there's arguments about the up slap or the down slap, right? A lot of bass players do this. You got to understand a lot of bassists are popping on the high E string, so this might make sense. I think as a guitar player though, a lot of times you're going to need more of popping these strings, so mechanically this is going to work better. The other thing to always keep in mind is it's not important to do it the way a bass player does it. It's important to do it in a way that achieves the tone a bass player gets. And that's going to be very different because a bass player has a high mass strings. The pickups are very different. So you got to think it takes a lot less physical exertion to get a bass to make a big slap sound. On an electric guitar with light strings, these are 9-42s, by the way. It's more difficult. So you might even want to start this on steel stringed acoustic, but it should even be doable on a classical guitar or a ukulele. It's not going to sound great, but it's doable. Anyway, so what we have to think about it as is I need to be really relaxed. So slapping is exactly like playing a percussion instrument. So if you had to play on a snare drum that was tuned really loose, your grip on the sticks would have to be really light to still get it to rebound. And that's the problem here. So, okay, we got to think about how to do that, right? Because this is basically a force equals mass times acceleration problem, right? The mass of my thumb and the strings don't change. So I'm trying to get acceleration. So if I can be looser, right, I can whip it faster, which will give me more force. And that's the idea. It's an energy transfer physics problem. All right, so the loose grip on the stick is how loose my thumb is. So if I'm stiff like this, it's going to be real hard to rebound. You're going to have that problem. We're going to push into the string just like pushing a drumstick into a drum head. Okay, so we got to be totally relaxed. We don't want the thumb to actually be involved in moving, but it's going to be relaxed. Okay, if the thumb's involved in moving and you try to swat the string, you're just going to push into the string, or you're going to kind of linger on the string as you're trying to rebound, and you won't get a big sound out of it. Okay, so I want this completely loose. So for me, this is harder to be relaxed because I'm having to stick my thumb up, and it's not even that productive for how I would want to play. So essentially you're trying to get parallel, right? It's like if you were to bounce a stick off the guitar, it's not going to work great parallel. Okay, now you're probably thinking I've seen John Mayer do that. I've seen other guys slap sort of parallel, but we gotta dispel the myth a little bit. There's a big difference between slapping for percussion and actually getting a pitch out of that. So it's not great. If I'm more perpendicular though, it's gonna work. Okay, so you have to get used to that. And the big thing is to be relaxed. I want to be loose. Okay, so I'm dangling from above, close to perpendicular. I need to think of it like a drumstick again, okay? So that how you angle the head of the drumstick hitting the drum head, the angle of incidence, right, is going to determine how well we transfer energy. Okay, so the high point on your thumb is the little knuckle here, right? So that's what I'm aiming for on the strings when I bounce off them. Okay, so what you want to try first is mute the other strings and relax, and I'm using arm rotation. This is just like if you were to wrap your knuckles, sorry, not your knuckle, if you're just absentmindedly tapping your thumb on a tabletop. If you can do that and stay loose, that's the beginning of understanding how this works. Okay, so I don't want to do this or this or this. I just want to rotate and bounce off the string. So don't linger, mute the other strings. Here we go, open E. Now, if you're starting to get it to work, try a fretted note. That's a lot harder to do. The pitch is getting wimpier and wimpier, right? Then if that works, try the A string. And the D, okay? And you start to get a handle on that. Okay, the other part to consider is, do I close my hand when I do this or open it? I started closed, but then when I started getting into more popping, this became cumbersome because what I want to avoid doing is putting my knuckles and my nails into the string. So the result of that is I have to stay curled up like that to slap. You can do it, but it gives you more options for muting and doing popping with different fingers if you keep them open, I think. So you can hear how much bigger that sounds already. Okay, so that's the idea with that. So arm rotation, relaxed, hit there, okay? The other part of this is the popping. Okay, so how do we pop? Well, if you're doing like, you know, that sort of stuff, a lot of times you're collapsing the knuckles and pulling through the strings, which is different than normal classical guitar playing, right? But when we're popping and slapping, what we're doing is winding up for the slap. So I'm not doing anything with my finger, I just hook it under here. And then you want to just cut off quick. And in fact, instead of thinking of fretting and cutting off, think of sitting on the surface and stabbing through the string with no duration, okay? So it's the coiled snake waiting to strike, right? So there you go. Okay, so there's that. Now, we also have the dead slap. So I'm just muting and I let it come to a stop. And if you notice, that's a lot more dead. The other part to keep in mind is like where to slap, okay? So if you think of your pickups here, where the sweet spot is to me is from the end of the fingerboard to the beginning of, at the very most, the first pull piece on the neck pickup. What you'll hear is if I start going farther and farther back, you're going to get a clacky artifact of the note. So here's where I like to be, is right at the beginning of the pickup cover. See, that's not a nice sound, okay? Now, bass players slap closer to the end of the fingerboard. You can do that, but it'll be a lot thinner, and you've got to remember, we're not playing bass strings, we're playing thinner strings. So I'll show you what that'll sound like. It's not bad. I use that to EQ the guitar sometimes, but if I want a note that sounds more like a bass, selecting your neck pickup, especially a humbucker guitar, will give you a tone closer to what, like, you know, a funky bass sound sounds like with a single coil pickup where they're slapping near the neck. See, much bigger. That is especially is true if you're playing a fretted note. So you can hear how much bigger that is when I slap there. So that's the window of sweet spots for where you can slap. Okay, now we've also got percussive pops, so you could mute and, right? Same sort of thing. You've also got left-hand slapping. Now that's pretty tricky because the thinking here is you don't want to go, okay, but the trick is I got to have a nice loud. That way I can get speed, so I don't have to go. Now you want to be able to do that though, but I could go, or something like that, right? Okay, so you have to work on that. The test here that I think works is to actually do this on your forearm because you'll feel it squeeze. So we want to be able to have it, boom, a lot of velocity, drop down, don't squeeze, just die, like that. But that takes a while to get used to. And if you notice, I've got my first finger there to keep the strings muted. I don't want to do that, you know? Okay, so a lot of this is the muting. So I'll show you, like, here's a, with the muting. Right? If I don't mute, it's going to be bad. Here you go. Right, so that's the thing. Remember, yeah, you can hit one string, but the other ones are still going to resonate. This applies to the same rules of normal lead guitar string damping. You got to follow those rules. Slapping makes it really worse. Once you clean it up, though. So if you notice, every time I go in for the pop, the tip of this finger is touching that string that was ringing. Okay, now I could mute that with the palm because I'm not doing this slap direction. If I slap it this way, I couldn't mute it. I could use this, but it's a lot easier to use the tip of my finger because then I can be a lot freer with the slap. Now if I was, let's say, gonna go like that, you can see my palm is touching the low E and my index finger is muting the A, and that's the advantage of this over this, okay? Anyway, the other thing you could take a look at is also harmonic slapping. Okay, so same kind of principles. So let's say if I'm doing, or let's say maybe so you could add that in there. Okay, so you're bouncing off the string 12 frets higher from where you're fretting. If you're doing a whole chord, what you want to do is experiment and just split the difference. So here, the bar has a lot of the notes, so I'm going to go 12 frets higher than that bar. But let's say you had a chord that was, more of the notes are here, so I'm going to do 12 frets higher from this finger here, okay? But you can experiment with that. Even if you have like a, kind of a broken chord, that sort of thing. You could throw that in there. Also, you could tap these, right? So let's say if I had, you could also slap those with the nub of your thumb. It'll give you a little different. Okay, if you go do some compression, a little bit overdrive with that, that can really bring that out too. Then the last part is the double thumbing. Just starting to get this under control myself. So the concept here is, we're trying to do like rest strokes. So I'll show you, if I did it like a normal sort of rest stroke, but I tried to go like alternate back. So this isn't what it is. You can see how tricky that is, right? Anyway, so the way I kind of found the angle is if I start with a normal classical guitar natural position and just let my palm droop down, and then the thumb has just the right amount of elevation up and just the right amount of this sort of parallel sort of position that it can get through the string easier. So I kind of start with my normal position, kind of get lazy, okay? And then from there you can add we could hammer. That sort of thing. Or you could even sort of like a Chili Peppers sort of thing. But that's something you could mess with there. I've seen like Tosin Abasi of Animals Leaders doing this a lot. He tends to kind of do more thumb movement. You could do that. That would get pretty tiring for most people. And it's, he's doing that on heavier gauge, like on an 8-string. So would that hold up and sound as percussive here? For me, it doesn't. It's a lot easier to actually do what a bass player does. But you got to work on that. That one was that, and this were the toughest things for me to get right. Anyway, hope that helped you guys. Start messing with that. You don't have to use these techniques purely in bass patterns. You can use them on acoustic guitar. They sound great. It's just another way to get a percussive element into your playing that's well, not even percussive, but if you need a different attack melodically, it's great. You should really experiment it. Don't segregate your techniques. Don't think if I'm playing fingerstyle, I must play normal fingerstyle. There's no reason you couldn't tap, slap harmonics, put that in. Basically, it should be guerrilla guitar playing, right? Like guerrilla warfare. Anything goes, any means necessary to get the sound I want. Anyway, if you like this, please subscribe, and then I'll consider doing some more in the future. Thank you.